Good morning and welcome to CIO Talk Radio. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. Today's topic is IT modernization, why now and how. Our guests for today's show are Gopal Khanna, who is a CIO with State of Minnesota and is also the president of National Association of State CIOs. Morning, Gopal.
Good morning, Doug.
How are you, sir, doing?
Very well, and thank you for having me on the show.
Great. And we also have Peter Gapp, who's the vice president and CIO with Siemens Canada. Morning, Peter.
Morning, John.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Very good. Good. I'm loving the Chicago weather. I'm sure you are there in Canadian. Which region are you in?
I'm in Toronto. So pretty much the same Great Lake area as Chicago, so the weather patterns are very similar.
Great. Now, while we have seen weather being similar, but across the world, we also see this whole wave about IT modernization. And of course, we have different waves we see in IT. Many people have IT modernization being defined in one way, whereas others have their own definition. So exactly if I were to look at IT modernization, is that getting rid of mainframes or making the whole IT more agile and rich in functionality? Or it is basically, what is it? I mean, if you were to really define it. So Gopal, let's start with you.
Well, the way I see IT modernization, especially in government, and right now I'm working in government, and even though in the past I've worked as a CIO in the private sector, the truth of the matter is that the current platform that the government services are delivered are not really ready to serve the citizens in the 21st century, where the citizens are looking for not inline service, but really being served online. And all our operational platforms for the delivery of our programs were really built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, more fashioned around the brick and mortar infrastructure of corporate America. Having said that, we have a shift in the way in which the citizens would like to be served. One. Number two, we've got major cybersecurity threat that we are facing as an economy, as a world, where here in America, at least, our $14 trillion economy really is supported in all our industry segments by the digital infrastructure, which makes it operational. And finally, the third piece is that we have a huge shift, particularly in government, where the baby boomers are retiring. So having said that, on the supply side, you've got a diminishing workforce. On the demand side, you've got a totally different buying pattern of the citizens. And in the middle, you've got all your IT assets at risk. So for me, the way I define IT modernization is a whole transition that will take us to the desired to-be state, where the operational structure government is totally different. And the best way I can explain that is, if you look at Google, Amazon, or eBay, their operational structure in their own entities is very different from a typical quintessential company that has evolved and grown from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. They had the advantage, they had the clean sheet. We don't, in bulk of our organizations, have a clean sheet advantage. And therefore, the challenge is to take it from as is operating environment to the desired to-be state. And for me, the way I would define it is that whole transition component is the IT modernization component.
When you say the word clean sheet, could you ever imagine the speed at which we move, the complexity which gets introduced? Can we ever reach that nirvana, if you will?
No, we will not. And that's both the challenge and the opportunity. The challenge is that there are too many barriers and too many issues, and which we can talk about at length. But to talk about the opportunity component of it is to at least define the end state where we would like to take our operating environment. So by design, we can move from the as to the to-be state. It may take 10 years. And that's why the whole journey of IT modernizations, particularly in government, is not really a year or 2 year phenomena. It will really probably take 10, maybe 15 years to do, but it can be achieved by design.
So Peter, we have been doing all this for the most part, what Gopal mentioned, in piecemeal maybe, or in some cases as an initiative in a structured manner. What's so special about this IT modernization wave? What is that bringing to us?
I don't think it's really that special. I mean, it's more like finally attention to a more holistic approach. Because the Gopal said, it's not saying isolationally looking at the visual systems and outsourcing pieces or modernizing certain servers or technology. really more an approach you have to take to focus on the changes in culture, in the business, changing of processes, changing of the demand that the business has on IT, but also the change in technology and also changing of that IT skill set. You mentioned earlier the Generation X as well as the baby boomers and the impact of that on technology is significant. So I think the special thing is here really more focusing on how to integrate now the IT modernization in like a long-term plan to integrate into your strategy. So you're not in a reactive mode, but really start to plan out several years out what eventually the to-be state is and how you're going to get there. So it's really more a holistic approach, looking at various different assets to define an IT landscape, including supporting applications and processes to be more agile, support the business needs and respond to the business demand, and hopefully also in a more cost-effective manner. So we have to try to take more the complexity out of the systems and really build something that's easy to maintain, more flexible and scalable, and also responds quicker than to the demand from the.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think it's really a question of the maturity of the organization. I'm speaking right now more from the private sector side. I'm sure there's organizations out there, they're more like in a reactive mode. They're currently cutting costs. They're looking at keeping the light on and keeping the necessary systems running. I think what you have to look at is innovation is going to cost more money in the long run. And you have to take a look at a more holistic approach and see how all the systems are interconnected and not just then do firefighting and replace the system when it's necessary. So it's really more a strategic foundation, I think, for this approach and not just reacted for operative initiative.
Now, you use the word holistic multiple times, and I've seen people also interpreting and or misinterpreting as boiling the oceans. When was the last time we were actually successful in any of these holistic initiatives?
Well, it's not just avoiding the ocean. I think the holistic approach is one thing, but you have to have very clear focus. So you need to go through your portfolio of your assets, your portfolio of your applications and processes, and really focus on the things that are the biggest impact for the.
You're fading out, Peter.
Yeah, you need to focus on primarily on the processes and initiatives and the business that create the most value. So you cannot fix everything at once. You really have to sort of focus on. And when you say a holistic approach here, I'm more talking about a more interconnected approach and looking at the domino effect of replacing certain the effect they have on applications, on various different interfaces, on the data flows, and also on the processes of the regular business. That's my view of holistic. So I'm not saying we can replace everything at once, and looking at a different system, different stage of life cycle. Some of them might not require an immediate replacement, but we have to take a look at the impacts on the systems and others because they're all interconnected, and they create the complexity.
So with respect to complexity, Gopal, do you think if the silver bullet that we are calling as IT modernization could help us eat the cake and have it too, where we can reduce complexity and still have an agile system where everything is integrated?
Well, again, that had to be one of the objectives of this whole IT modernization initiative portfolio program that we manage over the next few years. It really is not the silver bullet, I must say. What it does is because we still are in the early stages of innovation in the information technology sector. If you look at it over the last 55 years, complexity factor has grown because the IT stack that we as CIOs have to manage has evolved and grown really large and vast and deep and broad and wide. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. In the early, up until the 70s or mid-70s, it was pretty much a mainframe-centered operating environment. So you mostly had homegrown or specialized applications. So you had a very simple environment to maintain and run your computer centers and manage them. But then suddenly there was the explosive innovation in various kind of tools, technologies that were available, resulted in us buying commercial off-the-shelf applications, cost solutions. Then came the distributed computing environments. It was not just mainframe, it became fan server environment, desktop, etc. Over the next 20 years. We also had the evolution of various kind of databases that came about, then tools and technologies that supported them and analytics, etc. And then came in the 90s where there was another spurt of explosion in terms of innovation and particularly centered around the deployment of all commercialization of the internet, where now we started going online. So all the applications had to be moved and be prepared to serve in a web-enabled environment. And that took another few years for it to mature. And now suddenly, when we put everything out there, we started getting hit by hackers who don't mean us well. So we have to add one more flavor to the whole pie, and that's the cybersecurity. But if you look at the IT stack, it has a really evolved from mainframe-centered stack into such a diverse stack of IT assets, verticals within vertical, that are huge in this $4-5 trillion sector globally, and there's no silver bullet. So as a CIO, we have to manage this today's IT asset base of an enterprise, which is the high.
Okay.
Are
you there?
Yeah, in the industry is still in its early stages of innovation, I would say, because as mobile technologies evolve, the applications will change, and new assets would have to be managed. So in no way would I suggest that this journey is going to be easy, because we still have to manage the average environment. We cannot shut our organizations down. So while we have to envision the clean sheet, which has to evolve also, by the way, as new technologies get deployed, nobody has a clue as to what is going to be in the environment 2 or 5 years from today. So when we have this conversation about IT modernization, it is more of a journey, but it has to be a well-strategized and well-thought-out journey with major components identified. So we as an industry together manage it, as opposed to just being driven by a CIO. I think all the partners and stakeholders, including business leaders, because at the end of the day, IT is trying to enable and make the delivery of insane government programs more effective. And in the private sector, we make the business more effective and successful and profitable. So having said that, the IT sector and industry has to come together as well, because the provider of hardware may see and have one vision of making and deploying their solutions in a robust manner over the 10, 15 years. So would the software folks and the database companies, etc. But they have to start looking at things horizontally, not just vertically in their own segment. And that's where the complexity factor comes in on IT modernization conversation. So what we have to seek is a uniformity in our thought process, a little bit more of a standardized approach going forward.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back after these messages and kind of put in simple terms what IT modernization is. Is it plainly reducing risk and reducing complexity and increasing the overall value that IT delivers? Is in simple terms, that's what we could define, or there's something else that we would start with Peter and see, and we can at least define it and then move forward. Please state your.
Up-to-date business and financial news. Call now and get the financial information you need. 866-472-5790. 866-472-5790. The experts are here. Voice America Business Network.
Looking for flexible ways to scale your IT efforts? Then visit www.avol.com today. Avol helps companies find the global IT talent they need to align their IT and business objectives. Whether it's hiring top IT leadership talent or building a reliable technology team, Avol delivers. To find out how Avol can help your company, visit www.avol.com or call 1-800-947-2832. Avol, delivering global IT talent. That's www.avol.com. Visit today.
Do you realize how much the way you think and feel controls everything in your life? On Neurogenesis, join Dr. Joe Dispenza as he answers a wide variety of questions, from topics like the mind-body connection to the process of personal change, the origins of disease to emotions and brain chemistry, just to name a few. There is a true biology to personal transformation, and it applies to you. Neurogenesis with Dr. Joe Dispenza broadcasts a new program every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time on the Seventh Wave Network. Tune in so you can lose your mind and create a new one.
There are two fundamentals required for business success today. The first is a robust strategy, one that's in sync with the marketplace and has a focus on delivering value. The second business fundamental is talent. The single biggest factor in the sustained health of a company is having the right people in the right roles, doing the right things. Join Michael Couch, the president of Michael Couch & Associates, each week as he explores elements of these two fundamentals on the Voice of Business Growth, Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, on the Voice America Business Channel.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to CIO Talk Radio. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. If you have a question or comment, call toll-free 1-866-472-5790. Now back to the show. Here's Sanjog Aul.
Welcome back. So, Peter, starting with you, can we safely say that IT modernization is basically about reducing complexity, reducing risk, and bringing all the benefits that we always dreamt of?
I don't think so. That's a simple question, but I want to give you the view from the business side because they don't really care necessarily about the tools and technology that's running in the background. What they want is they have a pressure right now in this economic environment. They want to perform to the facilities with their resources available, maximize growth. And they need the tools and the team infrastructure to support it. So it's really a job then from the CIO to take these changing business requirements, and it's really high pressure on the business today on making sure that all the tools and applications and infrastructure is available for that. So that's really the driver primarily, because if the systems are not agile anymore and cannot respond to the business need, it's a problem to provide the right capacity, the right performance, and the flexibility to support the business process. That not really drives from the change in technology, and that's really driving of the change in the business processes as well as the application. So it's really more connecting all the stars from having the right tools available to support the business at the end of the day. So that is not a reactive, one-time, one-off kind of scenario. We're talking about here really a close alignment between the IT, the CIO strategy with the business strategy. We behind the eight ball all the time, so really prepare for it in future and integrate it in a long-term strategy. And that's really what is the key is here. And if you look at organizations and they have a long-term planning that is in focus, modernization should not be a really big deal, at least not in the short and mid-term. Over part of the regular day-to-day business, and we're looking ahead and impact with 5 years out, 7 years out, and we can never predict exactly what's going to come. And also, as Gopal said, I don't think we know what the 5 years from now is going to bring us, but at least dealing with yesterday's technology today, you're prepared with today's technology, and hopefully in next year's technology already now, we can plan for some of those changes more effectively. And that's really what the business requires to have to do, because we have limited funds available, and we don't want to throw bad money at good money, and vice versa. So we have to spend some money now to really be more effective going forward.
When you did take this particular business case back to the IT, as the executive management and also the business unit leaders to get buy-in and to get the funding, what were the challenges that were thrown, or what those questions were which you had to field and convince them that this is something to be done now, or at least be started now, even though we are in a keeping the lights on mode? And what answers convinced them?
Well, I think there's multiple facets to this. And one is you can look at it very simply. You analyze your current cost, the current environment. And if you look at some of the older systems, the legacy systems, very clear that the maintenance cost and total cost of ownership is high, is actually increasing. So it's very simple to analyze what the migration, the move to new technology will bring you. In the long run, it's going to reduce your costs because you have older systems that have been running for a long time. You have a dependency on certain providers and suppliers. The cost of maintenance goes. You have, anytime you have a new requirement from the business to change, it's going to be more costly to adopt to this change because you don't have the flexibility. We can take an approach from the cost side. This is one piece. And that's pretty simple because one-time investments today is something that will pay off over multiple years. You don't expect to have a business case that pays off immediately, as long as we can take some of those costs out of the equation that you're currently paying for some of the older systems. But the second, more critical piece is, I think, that we can actually demonstrate to the business that the new platforms, the new architecture will be more beneficial to the business and actually create either saving in the business itself, or provide additional value. So having just an IT business case by itself and looking at a cost before and cost thereafter is a little bit difficult. It's more showing the new capabilities, and that's why you need to have the full buy-in from the business. You need like a sponsor, an advocate in the business that actually drives it. So it's not purely just an IT project. It's a joint project with the business. And you need to have the sponsorship and primarily buy-in for that. Otherwise, they're just talking about changing some boxes in the background. You will never get the attention from the CEOs and CFOs and VPs of sales and whatnot, because they don't care about the technology in detail. They just want to make sure we have tools in place that support it better than before, and they can automate some processes. They can have a higher throughput for the organization. That's really where the business case essentially lies.
So are you saying that if we go to the business executive management and say, I'll bring you top line growth through this initiative versus bottom line savings, that has a better chance of success?
For sure, you get a attention from completely different audience in the business. I mean, cost savings for me, this is more like something we have to do anyway. This is something that will happen in the back office. But if you have more compelling tools and applications available that actually supports the business on the front end, then you get a lot more attention.
Gopal, what do you think about this? When was the last time you had to go to executive management and make a step?
Well, again, in government, the making of the pitch is quite different because we are the ultimate public entity there is from a management perspective. And from a quintessential model perspective, IT has been and should be subservient to the program, where program delivery is ultimately the most important from our customers, the citizens' perspective. So it's always about delivery of the program. IT makes it efficient, effective, and more citizen-centered. Having said that, when we talk about IT modernization, we're really talking about a totally different paradigm. I'll give you about half a dozen things. Number one, the modernization is to achieve the end goal of changing the operational model of the enterprise. One. Number two, that all the rules and structures that defined the construct of the as-is environment are really obsolete. They cannot be valid going forward. To give you an example, we cannot make decisions based upon the old model of ROI, return on investment, because IT is no more a cost center, it's a resource center. What that means is the CEOs and the stakeholders is to say, if I invest $5 million more, what else can I get out of it? And as Peter was saying, how does it enhance the effectiveness of the top line of the business in the private sector? And conversely, in the public sector, how does it make the data secure? How can the service be made available in real time to the citizens wherever and they live at their discretion and at their pleasure, rather than urging our customers to come to us to be served. And that's a very different paradigm. The third component is the governance piece. We have governed IT assets and managed them very differently. I think going forward, the portfolio management will change very significantly, but to achieve the end desired outcome. The fourth component is a vertical versus a horizontal look. Even within corporations and certainly within government, IT is embedded all over and is not seen as a program, really a horizontal program. It's really difficult to come to terms with that view of IT asset, because they started by being just a dignified computer 30, 40 years ago. So they proliferate the entire organization's operating environment and are seen really as a cost entity that I have to buy a computer to become more effective, as opposed to I'm investing in my systems. And therefore, the business practices, which is the next component, it really is about re-engineering the business processes, because at the end of the day, to be effective globally, whether we are in the private sector or locally, to serve the citizens, we have to have continually improving business processes so that we make our workforce more productive, especially in government as more and more people retire. And one of the ways to do that is to leverage the IT solution stacks horizontally. And that's a very different paradigm of managing the IT assets as well. So to answer your question, the challenge before us as IT leaders and IT industry players is to look at this changing context and be part of changing that conversation because the game is changing beneath our feet, and either we're going to be doing it by default.
When you are looking from a government sector, don't you think that as a prerequisite, first you have to change the mindset of the folks who are consuming IT for them to not look at it as just a bunch of computers doing something that we wanted to do versus something which is more ingrained into how we do things and how pervasive and how important an impact it can have on the way we run our government and other operations?
Absolutely, yes. And my colleagues in all these states have the same challenge, because it's not just the changing the mind of our customer, because our ultimate customer is the citizens. At the same time, we serve our agencies, our program leaders. So they too have to see this asset as this resource differently. We also have our customers, our lawmakers, the legislators who ultimately approve the budget. And their governance structure would have to change significantly to oversee the IT assets of government horizontally rather than vertically in the current siloed decision-making environment, which is very jurisdictional, which is very program-centric, which is very committee-centered. And that's a huge shift in the whole establishment. The governors, and most of my colleagues are blessed to have them, and I'm blessed to be working for a Governor Tim Pawlenty, who understands technology and understands the value of it. And so I have tremendous support. So having the support of the CEOs is exceedingly important, especially in government, but also and that needs to be bipartisan, the public's large, because ultimately when investments are made in IT assets, we are fighting and competing against some very compelling demands in other areas where citizens may want better services delivered, and IT investments are the easiest one to explain.
We'll stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages and discuss the topic further by looking at the challenges that we might face because of some of our IT crew may have the retirement plan tied in with the IT modernization initiative, and which could play more as a stumbling block than as a catalyst. Why is that? Please stay tuned, and let's discuss more when we come back.
Whether the market's up or down, or if you're looking to improve your portfolio, our experts are ready to talk to you. Call now toll free 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
Do you need directions to solid financial future? If so, the Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman will provide you with a roadmap to making smart money decisions in every area of your personal finances. Join Jordan every Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern for the Money Answer Show on the Voice America Business Channel. Learn how and where to get the best deals on mortgages, cars, and insurance. Find out the best ways to save for college and retirement. Get out of debt, improve your credit rating, and save on your taxes. The Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman will provide you with great tips on investment opportunities in real estate, stocks, annuities, and other investment vehicles. That's the Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman on the Voice America Business Channel every Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Looking for flexible ways to scale your IT efforts? Then visit www.avol.com today. Avol helps companies find the global IT talent they need to align their IT and business objectives. Whether it's hiring top IT leadership talent or building a reliable technology team, Avol delivers. To find out how Avol can help your company, visit www.avol.com or call 1-800-947-2832. Avol, delivering global IT talent. That's Avol.com. Visit today.
From the boardroom to you, Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to CIO Talk Radio. To learn more about the show, please visit www.ciotalkradio.com. If you have a question or comment, call toll-free 1-866-472-5790. Now back to the show. Here's Sanjog Aul.
Welcome back. So, Peter, what do you think the connection between your IT crew's retirement plan and a potential risk that it may bring to the IT modernization initiative.
Yeah, that's a very interesting situation. I would almost call it with a field crisis, because what's happening is we are running systems for years, and the folks that are now approaching this retirement age, specifically baby boomers and even like earlier Gen X, they're the ones that actually develop the systems. They're the ones to design them. It's like they are babies, if you will, on the maintaining those systems. And there's a huge concentration of risk. Knowledge and skill set is contained within this generation. And if you look at, say, like 20 years ago, when you go through IT education, you can see fundamentally different. And I bet you there's still some COBOL and Fortran programs out there running, doing the same thing for 10 or 20 years now. And if those programs and those tools and applications are really business critical, you gotta have a problem. And that's what we'll call it, almost like a crisis. Because eventually you gotta lose this knowledge. Those folks who retain this knowledge and skills today will eventually retire. And you don't have the newer generation, X or Y, coming and have any interest in the skill set because it's just not the reality anymore. Then you will have a gap, skill set gap. Well, that's one point. The second point is, if you look at the IT modernization plan, in order to move forward in some new technologies, you do require the legacy knowledge at this point. Because one of the biggest challenges of migrating to technologies always is the knowledge of the legacies, the knowledge of the data, the knowledge of the information, the knowledge of the different processes and interfaces they're running. If you don't have that, if you lose some of this knowledge early enough, your IT modernization plan is also in jeopardy. You do need to have this continuity and really slow the transition from the old to the new. So there's a lot of dependencies still there. So one of the ways to get around this is certainly to eliminate the dependencies from the old systems and also the knowledge associated with that. You can also offer career pathing as well as some other job opportunities for some of those folks that are critical. You need to identify them. And when I said earlier, you need to identify your asset of your current environment that also include people, that includes knowledge and skill. And anytime you look at an application, server or hardware, whatever it is, you need to have obviously certain knowledge behind it that allows you to clean it and also in the future transition it to a new technology. But there's ways around it, I think, besides offering career pathing was not the transition. So you want to make it very attractive for them early enough, embrace those new technologies. They have a certain continuity there in the retain of resources now that you need. Because otherwise you have to go out to the market and repeat some really high prices for some of those, at this point, probably unique and not up to leads on knowledge and skill. So I think it is certainly one of the factors you have to put in consideration for your overall modernization initiative. But that's more to it as well. I mean, you have to look into restructuring the organization. It could be the older focus on more Spark-driven, data center-driven kind of applications. You need to build more the knowledge around the properties, a very strong product management, a very strong demand management of the business, and interface to the business to have a continuity in your current technology and going forward. So, sure, it is a risk. I think it can be mitigated, and it also depends on the life cycle for the systems you currently have. Some of them are more critical than others. If you have some core systems starting to age, you better have a plan very soon.
Now, Gopal, I'm sure you'd have been experiencing this a little or more, or I would say equal amount of conflict between the retirement plan and how you could run an IT modernization initiative. Did you ever have a heart-to-heart talk with the person who is representing that community and say that what is your fear or paranoia? Explain to them, and then what has worked in terms of allaying their fears and have them come back and try supporting it?
Well, in Minnesota, the executive branch government, and I know from talking to my colleagues all across the country, approximately 50% our workforce in IT and actually non-IT as well would retire over the next, or would be eligible to retire over the next 10 years. And then that's because of the aging of the baby boomers who were really an integral part of the growing government in the 50s and the 60s. And then all coming of age. So, and they will retire and then move on. And I think that's where the opportunity comes, because with the conversion of all the technology solutions that are available, and that's one thing I've been talking about a lot, is that it's not really an issue about IT modernization. It's really about the organizational modernization or the entity of modernization on a continual basis, because the underlying component that made an organization, a private sector company or a government efficient 20, 30 years ago, because we had IT introduced in it, it become an integral part of the workflow. It has become an integral part of the input process and output. So if you look at a bank, right, it is part of the demand chain because you have a plastic card that you can use in the ATM machine. It is part of the end product. It is part of the demand chain. If you look on the input side in bank, they have data and information coming, because no bank is now isolated to one unique existence. It is interrelated to the federal government, to the global markets. And in the process, in the middle, no banking process is now possible without using information technology solutions and accompanying business practices. Similarly, in government, technology has now become part of what I call the supply chain, the process, and the demand chain. Today, when we deliver educational material in the classrooms, it is part of the demand chain. Our students have a much stronger learning experience when our teachers have those tools available in the classroom. Our police officers are far more effective when they have appropriate tools available in their police cars. So should there be a person they need to apprehend, they can do the right apprehension rather than wrong. Judicial system serves the citizens better in the courtroom when the judges and the judicial system have available information in the courtroom. That's part of the demand chain. But that didn't happen without the processes in our various agencies that support the delivery of those services at the end point. So I think we as an industry need to change the context, because it is about, we can modernize IT and yet fail because the business has to be part of it. It's one package. It cannot be seen separately, and has been seen separately too long. It is one entity. So when we talk about an enterprise or an organization, it is one ultimate entity, and whatever the end objective might be, if it's an NGO, the objective is to serve. If it's a government, it is to serve the citizens' services. If it's a private sector company, to have better market penetration and the time to market and global strategies, and of course profitability. But what has to change is also the expectation. The industry has to move away. Then the solution providers have to think in a longer term, because while we are able to save money by modernizing certain components of the IT stack, we have to reinvest the money to modernize on a continual basis. So when the message is constricting, we as IT leaders are saying reinvest the money so that we can make the organization continually better and effective. And the vendor community may say, hey, if you buy my solution, you can save money. So the stakeholders, the decision makers see, well, let's save the money and let's move the money off the table. And we as IT leaders are saying, no, you save the money, but you've got to reinvest it in your organizational readiness for the future. So Peter is right when he's talking about that there are many pieces to it. So time has come when we have got to raise the bar on the conversation and talk more about organizational modernization, because that's what it's all about. Because if we do not continually do that in the private sector, we'll face a huge competition from the emerging BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and other economies that are flourishing, that are penetrating our own marketplace. And that's fine, that's good. And because we have an opportunity to penetrate the global marketplace. Likewise, locally, government units have to work cross-jurisdictionally. So those barriers have to be demolished. And likewise, sometimes we inflict pain upon ourselves by limiting our own definition too much.
Peter, what Gopal said in a way, and Gopal, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that we should not only be looking for just plain support from executive management and business users and overall end users, we should them to take ownership of this project, because it's going to come and benefit them, and only then we can get the most benefit out of this initiative.
Yeah, and you know what? I think this applies to most of IT projects, because I don't think there are IT projects anymore. There should be all business projects. And I mean, Gopal is saying that IT shouldn't be standalone as a silo, but not I fully agree, because IT, it's part of the business. I think it takes the right business leaders now to accept that. But it's all about this myth of technology and scaring the business of like too complex or complicated. But the bottom line is he understands what technology does for the business, and it's part of it. And if you take it out, the business will come to a standstill. So I think by this nature alone, because the business acknowledging the importance and the integration of technology within the business and the processes triggers automatically, or should trigger, the fact that the business will take the ownership and responsibility. So from my experience, when we have a larger project, a team modernization or a business integration, whatever it might be, you cannot just drive it from the IT side. The first thing you need to do is you need to identify very clear owners. I'll give you a simple example. If you take an ERP pieces, you have different components. Take a simple part of that. Take the FICO part, the finance and controlling part. The clear owner of that is not it is the sign of the parts, the ultimately CFO. And acknowledge that. I think it is already settled a long time ago because the first system that came out was supporting the finance from. Now we take a CRM system. Who owns the CRM system? It's not IT. It's really more the sale, it's the marketing organization, and they start to take ownership of that more and more. As soon as IT offers a less complex environment, you don't have to talk bits and bytes anymore. You talk about process, you talk about information management. That's the time the business also can sit down at the table and have an intelligent discussion with that people. You have to speak the same language. And that's really one of the triggers then that required for the business to take the ownership. Because then the IT modernization, as it is the case, is not an IT alone project. He will see the impact. He will see the change of the processes, which then trigger potentially the change in applications, change of all the way down to a different hosting model in the data. You don't need to know the details, but you understand how the thing link. And then if you can show it all the way from bottom back up and say, you know what, if I change this technology right now, it's going to impact the business process all the way in front end. It will now improve the ability to talk to your customers, go out there and sell more. That's the time they will understand that. This is the connection that we have to do. I think that's an important role of the CIO now to make it connect. You're not head of IT anymore or running a data center operation. It is a business function. And I think that's why those kind of projects are a little bit brushed off the table because it's focused on IT image knowledge, and it's not the case. It's really the change of the overall culture of the business, embracing new technologies, embedding it into the business processes, and leveraging it to the most extent and really getting the most value out of it. I think to answer this question, it's really not that different from any other IT project. Let's say you have a sponsor and an owner on the business side. You're going to have a problem because it's going to be looked at an overhead. It's going to be looked at purely from a money perspective, how much money is spending to do something. And it has to be part of the overall business case to really show that this is out in the benefit. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful with it.
Well, Peter said something totally brilliant, which is that as the business part recognizes that without that you cannot deliver your service, they will pull the change as well in the enterprise, in the thinking, because IT leadership, because of its innovation, has been at the cutting edge and trying to push the change. It's also about pulling the change. So the leaders have to do that. I do 3 quick examples. Number one, I have an assistant commissioner working for me whose wife is a medical doctor, and she changed employer because she said that where she was working, or she would offer 2 jobs. In one case, they were still paper-based, and the other one was fully automated medical practice where everything was electronic record. Then she chose the second one because she's of the generation where she says, I'm not going to want to work with the paper. When I was at the Chiefs Corps, we had much of a conversation about what the future is. And at one of our strategy sessions, I said, well, in 5 years, Peace Corps will be out of business. And they said, why? I said, because we're still paper-based. And my son, who's going to college, filled out received paper applications. He's used to operating online. So 10 years from now, by the time he graduates, if he's going to wait for a paper transaction to happen, he's going to move on to some other entity, and we lose the volunteers. So we went about modernizing our operational model so we could be relevant in the 21st century. Likewise, in government today, my colleagues feel our challenge is that the demand pool is not coming fast enough from the business side to take full advantage of the potential of the IT tools that are available to help make government more efficient, effective, and citizen-centric. So our challenges are dealing on the human side, as Peter said, are just as big as I would say, even on the investment side, we don't have mechanisms to provide sustainable funding mechanisms. In government, at least for IT projects, which are multi-year projects. They need to have good short timeline to give tangible efficiency and effectiveness gains, but in the long haul, they cannot be disrupted by the political life cycle. So there has to be a serious conversation about coming up with alternate funding mechanisms that are far more sustainable. And in terms of back solutions, as Peter was saying, that it really doesn't matter how the assets will be deployed. Some would be in-source, some would be right-source, some would be partnered with another entities and through cross-boundary collaboration. So the industry has to get engaged in this conversation. This is not just a CIO conversation. I think this is a conversation where the industry leaders have to think horizontally along with the business side and the IT leadership.
Gopal, absolutely right, because I think some suppliers and vendors are very engaging in that. I mean, take software as a service, for example. I mean, we at CIO, we're buying a service. We don't buy a server in a data center. We don't buy a platform. We need a service to support the business process in the business. And you're almost pushing the whole IT modernization piece to your supplier. If you're buying based on a certain SLA, you're buying a service with a specific functionality, a certain capacity, performance, whatever it is. But how it's being delivered, if it's now sitting in a concentrated data center somewhere, if it's based on slave technology or whatever it might be, it doesn't really matter. So we're almost pushing over this modernization piece from technology, specific in the hardware infrastructure component, out to a provider. At that point, you're really just looking at the service that you require. And I think some of the vendors actually pretty smart that way, and they're really starting doing that. I mean, started a few years ago with service-oriented architecture. So I was like, silver bullet for everything. I mean, it had matured quite a bit. But I think by simplifying this technology and the ability for you to connect them, more focus on the service and the dysfunction, more so than what the actual platform perform. I think it would be critical. And that's what the business understands as well. Because I have now this CRM tool, if you will, as a software as a service. I know exactly what the thing does for me. You don't care if the thing, running on a certain data center somewhere or in your own shop. You don't care. But now they can talk about technology in business terms. I think that's one of the changes that we've seen happening.
Now, do you think we are able to sell this big project when we no longer have the patience, especially the executive management, because they've been burned by the previously ERP implementations which span multiple years? And so IT modernization, you cannot do it tomorrow. And if it's going to take that long, are you able to convince someone just because of the size and the length it's going to take?
Well, yes, projects have failed. And the largest project that failed, I believe, was the Hewlett-Packard $645 million project, multi-year, and they had to finish it. In government, we've seen many multi-million-dollar projects fail. The 2-3 pieces over here. Again, the challenge that we have, and we have to roll our clock back 100 years ago, when we as a nation in the Western world were furiously inventing a lot of technologies at that time, which we now call brick and mortar technologies. The inventions were so furious that things were obsolete by the time the decisions were made. What's happening today in the workplace is that if we take too long to make decisions, the decision and implement it, if the time to action is long, then by the time you implement it, it's obsolete and does not meet the expectation, because during that time, the expectation has gone up. So definitely your projects fail. It's because the demand curve is constantly shifting. And on the implementation side, if the timeline is slowed for a variety of reasons, bad project management, bad leadership, bad control, paucity of funds, or whatever may be the reasons, and as we become more proficient at managing those risks, what you have to be cognizant of is that this is a complete team play. It is not versus business or business versus a governance structure. It is all one. And it has to be seen as from a more of an enterprise and horizontal perspective. So will there be failed projects in the future? Yes. What we can do is we can minimize the dollar impact of failure, because to promote innovation, you have to allow that taking. But the challenge is that instead of losing $100 million, can we lose $1 million and say, we are better for it? and we have learned, and we're going to therefore have our next implementation better. So there has to be tolerance for innovation and reward for that, but at the same time, tolerance from the point of view that risks would have to be taken. If we become too risk averse, we as organizations, we fail to fully leverage the competitive advantage our technology sector in North America offers us for gaining market edge globally, as well as providing better services locally.
Peter, 15 seconds. What are your thoughts on how we can convince government, your organization to not?
I think one way we can show is what happens if we don't do it. You really can also assess the situation right now. If you don't go for an IT modernization project, what are they actually losing out on? What are the opportunities they're missing? What are the competitive advantages potentially they're not going to have? So these are things that you will also understand to really focus on. Well, is it the status quo? You can keep on increasing your infrastructure. You can try to squeeze the last value out of it. Or you have new opportunities going forward with new applications, new tools to support your business better. So it's really one way you can approach it. But also, as I spoke before, you have to make sure we have a more integrated approach with it and integrated business.
On behalf of the show and our listeners, I'd really like to thank you, Gopal and Peter, about sharing your thoughts related to IT modernization. How can we do it, and why should we do it now? Now, there is no doubt that we could minimize, and in some cases, stop revenue leakage and at the same time significantly improve bottom line through IT modernization. The question is, do we have a magic formula available now? IT modernization to some extent has been an ongoing endeavor already in play. So what's new? What is so compelling that we should allocate separate budget, build a team, and get it done? Do we have any benchmarks or standards that would make this initiative predictable in terms of challenges and benefits that it's going to bring and we will experience? Please send us your thoughts to views@ciotalkradio.com. That is views@ciotalkradio.com. Thank you again for listening to CIO Talk Radio. This is Sanjog Aul, your talk show host. Till next week, take care and God bless.